Hey guys, we're Facebook Live. Thank you guys who are currently watching and paying attention. We're still waiting for candidate Ricardo Arroyo to join us in this conversation. Until he gets here, please help us share this live so that we can get this information out to as many community members who have tons of questions on safety equity regarding mass and class. That's our top priority. And it's like Mr. Arroyo is joining us now.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm starting this meeting on my phone, but I'll be logging in on my computer as soon as I get to the house. I'm just in the car right now.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Good.
So there'll be a little transition, but then I'll be on camera.
Hey, Andy.
Hello. You didn't make it to the meeting we had last week. I can fill you in later. It was a good meeting. Desi and I made it. It was a good meeting.
I heard. I'm excited. This is good that we have Counselor Tanya Anderson, who's willing to meet with us and try to put some steps forward to see what we can do.
I told her I wish I could move to the other side of Washington Street so I could vote for her.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited though. I'm excited. I'm happy that she's engaging.
She's really engaging. I couldn't be more thrilled.
And she gets it. She works in the mental health field. So she gets it. Again, guys, thank you guys for watching. Please help us share this live in Facebook groups within your personal page. We are meeting tonight with Counselor Ricardo Arroyo and also him as a candidate for Suffolk County DA tonight. We have, as you guys know, we have tons of questions around safety equity and what that would look like. And we're excited that Mr. Arroyo has is meeting with us so that we can kind of talk to him about, our constituent grievances, right, on safety and community members. And I'm looking forward to see what he's going to bring to the table to ensure that safety equity is a priority, not just only for individuals that are navigating mass and CAS, but also community. You can't keep separating the two.
Are we just waiting for Counselor Arroyo? He's on mute, but are we?
I'm here. I'm just actually logging into my computer now that I've made it home. So you'll see me log in on a different one, let that one in, and then I'll drop this. Just 1 second.
Great.
Can you hear me? Is the audio, everything good?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. So guys, Ricardo Arroyo's here. This is exciting. I'm gonna leave my camera off, guys. I don't feel good. I'm having a lot of post-COVID issues and I don't look so camera ready.
I'm sorry for that.
Oh man, it's been a disaster. All right, so without further ado, thank you for joining us, Mr. Arroyo. We're a laid back type of group, and introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you represent now as a counselor, and tell us why you're running for DA.
Yep, so my name is Ricardo Arroyo. I was a public defender before I ever became a city councilor, and so I worked in our criminal courts defending the indigent, the poor, people who were dealing with sort of the same issues that you see on Mass and Cass. In fact, I represented people who were on Mass and Cass because they would go to the Roxbury District Court where I worked out of. And so very familiar with sort of the issues that bring people into our courts and in the ways in which our courts can make a lot of those issues worse. Ended up running for the city council because I believed in like overall policy change to things. I liked that as a public defender, I got to help people on a one-on-one basis. And that was very powerful, but there was always sort of a systemic issue where people every day would come into courts with a lot of the same issues, and depending on who they made contact with, either those issues were solved or those issues were made worse or those issues were ignored. And so trying to make sure that we create systems that work on all levels for all people is a big part of the work that I try to do on a day-to-day basis. It's certainly the work I'm trying to do as a district attorney. And so I'm running for office. I represent right now as a district councilor, Hyde Park, Rosendale, and Mattapan. But the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office would represent Boston, Chelsea, Winthrop, and Revere. So it's a significantly larger sort of space. And obviously in that, one of the larger areas of concern would be Mass and Cass and things that are going on at Mass and Cass. But I'm happy to field questions or how people feel about certain things and just sort of have a free-flowing conversation that way.
Yeah, sure. Andy, you wanna ask a question?
Sure. So one of the things that I've been working with, we've been working with Councilor Anderson on, and you've probably gotten a couple of emails about this from me in the past, is that I don't think any of the things that we're doing at Mass and Cass are really being effective, right now. And the evidence that I cite, if it's not obvious, is Mayor Wu, under Marty Walsh and Mayor Janey up until the last 3 weeks of her term, the problem got steadily worse, not every day, but month to month.
Mhm.
And Wu cleaned it up a little bit in the winter when traffic is generally down seasonally, and for a few weeks, Mass and Cass looked like any other area in the city, at least on most of the time. But the continued focus on harm reduction and not holding anyone accountable has just created a situation where Mass and Cass doesn't look all that different than it did last year, and it's continuing to get worse week by week. So my question is, I'd be the first one to say that I don't think putting the people in mass and cast, arresting them and giving them a criminal record and putting them in jail is going to change anything. In fact, that's probably happened many times in the past to many of them, and nothing has gotten fixed.
And I think they've been doing it more and more over the last 8 months, and it hasn't really made much of an impact, right? Stay away orders and things of that nature.
But that said, what we're doing isn't working. And to be honest, even what a lot of people are asking for is probably not going to work a whole lot better, which is, well, let's just spread it out and not have it concentrated. That would certainly help us a little bit, at least for a little while. But it isn't going to make any of the people there any better. They'll just maybe be in a different place. What I would really like to see from a DA, and your opponent has committed to this, and I would like to see if you would also commit to it, that we want to do deferment, but deferment into treatment, treatment that is comprehensive treatment, and where you are held accountable to get better, and you're going to stay there until you do get better, but we're going to help you get better. Right now, we don't have any. That doesn't even exist in Massachusetts.
This is a major issue as a public defender. I could just tell you that the access to beds is a major issue. It was always a major issue. So there was always
Right.
wait lists for beds. And then what would end up happening is people would end up being in population. So Middleton did a detox. I was in Essex County, and Middleton was one of the very first jails to essentially do a detox facility. And what ended up happening is within like 72 hours of them opening the
That's
detox,
$10. $100. $100. Same with
within 72 hours of them creating this detox facility, they already had a 60-person waiting list. So it got filled within 3 days. And then what ended up happening, where people ended up in general population, where real harm happened to some of these folks. But what I knew at that point was that the detox facility was supposed to be so that they could get into rehabilitational facilities. So it was like a shortcut. It was easier to get somebody from detox into a bed than somebody who was just coming off the street. The problem was there weren't enough beds. And so we ended up with people being held for months, like 5,
Yep.
4. And it was just a problem that we've always had, which is that we don't have enough facilities. I've always argued that the amount of money we spend policing this issue should just be sent to expanding capacity for actual rehabilitation services. The other issue we had was what services were available to people with Mass Health. Because as you can imagine, people on Mass Ave and Mass and Cass don't have access to private insurance often. And so the locations that were available to them were very few and far between. And then most of them were dealing with dual diagnosis. And so there's like 2 of those places. And so you ended up with these issues with how do we get folks into this sort of space? And you're dealing with the issue of addiction, which is somebody can come to you right now and say, I'm ready to receive help and services. And if you can't give it to them within that window, they can forget about that later. And that's how that sort of works. It's the reality of like when somebody needs help and services, they need it right now. And so those issues are things that I've always been very cognizant of. What I can tell you is the goal would always be in my office to make sure that when we are deferring criminal cases, as I believe we should, that we are not just saying, thank you for coming, goodbye, we're not doing anything. It would be to connect them to actual resources and services. One of the concerns I have with that is that I'm worried about the capacity of those services. I don't know that we actually have the capacity to meet the need. And so one of the things that I have offered as a district counselor to this administration, I've been very public about this, I've said it at forums, I've said it privately, is part of the decentralization plan requires communities saying, okay, fine, you can decentralize some of that to us. I've made it very clear that when it comes to the housing that we're talking about, because I truly believe that giving people housing puts them in a position to accept and sort of better their lives in different ways because they can be stabilized. I've offered my district as a place where if you're looking to do that, as a counselor, I will be supportive of that rather than oppositional to that. And so I know that there's some units that are being explored. I believe we have some like 800 units in the pipeline. But a lot of these things, as you well know, this is not like a short-term problem. This has been a problem for, I think we're almost on a decade. I think this started in 2013 to be accurate in terms of that time frame. So we're almost at 10 years. And I don't know where we are with the Long Island Bridge. I know that we won a recent legal battle, but I don't think that's coming within the next 4 to 5 years if we get there. And so what I can tell you is my commitment is to do that, But I also just want to be really cognizant and realistic, as you know, to the shortages and the things that we have there. And so part of my plan is to make sure that we're directing funding towards creating capacity for the actual beds, for the actual access to these locations to actually take folks in and hold them and have them. We've had, as you guys probably know, there's places that do voluntary rehabilitation. In other words, you can leave at any time. And there's others that say you have to be here for a specific set of time. And I've had clients do both. And sometimes the one where you can't leave is actually effective for them. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes the one you can leave is effective for them. And sometimes it's not. And so every person's different. But I don't think either one of those models is necessarily bad. I just think we don't have enough access to them. There's not enough space for them. And I think that's something we really have to work on. And obviously, as a district attorney, I would not create these programs, but I do think the district attorney has money and the ability to essentially advocate for more money going into those specific sort of entry points. And that's what I would like to do. Where and how we can get folks into these spaces, rather than just saying, oh, I commit to everybody being in one of those spaces. I'm very realistic to the fact that we don't have those spaces. So I don't want to lie to you and say, oh, every single person who comes in definitely going into a place, when we know that every person who comes in, there's not a bed for them right now.
So I think we agree on a lot of things. I'm happy to hear that. One of the things I guess I have two questions, based on that. One is, okay, so we both agree there aren't enough beds now. We both wish there were. They're no matter what we do, they're not going to be there in the next few months. Much as I hate to say that, perhaps unless we get a little bit more creative and let Sheriff Tompkins do his thing. But let's put that aside for a second. The two questions are: one, what do you think? Let's say you win on in 2 weeks, and you don't. I don't know if there's an opposition, but you're going to be the next district attorney if you win in 2 weeks. So, what would you do? What would the first thing you would do? Call Kim Janey and say, let's do X. We need to relieve the suffering on Mass and Cass, and that includes, and especially includes, the surrounding neighborhood and businesses and kids and parks, as well as the people there. What would you say to do in the immediate, before we have any of those? That's number one. Number two, how much would you be willing to publicly advocate for using Long Island with no bridge? Not for, we can't use it for detox, and I understand that because it would put people in danger. But once they're out of detox and into where I don't know that I love the CSS TSS program, but that's what we have now. When they're ready to be in those programs, they're not in any immediate danger. They're really no more likely to have a medical incident than anyone else, and put them on Long Island there, where they could receive long-term care, the right kind of care, and where they can recover without being subjected to temptation. And this is sort of what was working, what we had. I don't believe Kim Janey is committed. She sort of makes noise about it, but would you publicly say, in order for me to be an effective district attorney, we need this, or is there some other plan that you have that is alternative to that?
So a couple things on this. First one is that I think U.S. Attorney Rollins has taken the stance of actually investigating Quincy and sort of what's going on with their opposition to this bridge. And I stand by that. I've supported that publicly. I support that publicly now. When it comes to the ferry service or any of those kinds of things, whether it's gondola or however we were trying to do that, I think there's been a number of different sort of ideas of how you could create safe travel. I think the number one thing people have always talked about, which you've sort of highlighted, is the safety concerns of not being able to have EMTs or fire or police access quickly this space. I support, if we can do that safely, if we can figure out a way to ensure that whatever emergency responses they need, we can get them. Absolutely. I don't think there's any issue with that. Even if, for instance, I've heard that the facilities there, some of them are in disrepair. And so even if some of them are in disrepair and under construction, I think you can ramp it up appropriately so that the spaces that aren't in as poor condition can start to be used in that way while you still get the rest of it on board. I don't think you have to have the whole facility ready to go, as long as you have a functional facility ready to go. And I would support that. I would absolutely advocate for that, as long as we're making sure that whatever legally requirement, like whatever the legal requirement is for EMT access or BPD access or fire access, they have that. And as I understand it, I think there's a fire department literally there's a fire station on the island. I don't know if it's staffed in any way, shape, or form, but there should hopefully be a way to do this that allows for sort of the rapid response that people would need if there was some kind of medical emergency or some kind of safety emergency. But yes, I would advocate for that as long as we can secure those things.
And then one last question, even that won't happen immediately. What would you in your first meeting with her as DA, what would you suggest to her as how to make the situation better than it currently is? Because what she has done has failed, period, full stop. So
I think, what I would just say is, from the standpoint of her plan, I think the housing hasn't come online yet. And so I know we've got about 147 or 174 units of housing that have come online for sort of low threshold housing. My understanding is there's another 800 total units coming online. And I want to give that a chance to succeed before I say that that's failed. But I would actually be advocating to make sure that we are pushing folks there. One of the things that I just want to be clear on is anybody who's committing violence or trafficking drugs and or people at Mass and Cass, we will be prosecuting that. I just want to be clear on that. That's going to get prosecuted. But the way that I think you get away from folks preying on individuals on Mass and Cass is that they not be on Mass and Cass. And so part of the issue I've had with Mass and Cass as a sort of a thing, and why I believe in decentralization and why I believe in sort of offering up my district as sort of a place where you could do low threshold housing or other districts and spreading that out, is because when you create one area where people who are going to bring drugs for sale are going to sort of create a hub, that's a problem. And if you spread that out, it creates less of that demand in that way. And so I think the way we get there is we do have to decentralize that in a bunch of different ways. But the first one that I really believe in is finding housing for individuals who are currently just living there. I don't think that, I've heard from other folks about, well, if you find housing for these folks, people are just going to keep coming because they're going to be looking for housing. But I think part of why they're coming is also because we've centralized the resources that they would need there. And so I think that decentralization is incredibly important to making it so that that doesn't happen anymore. I don't think you can wave a magic wand and make that happen immediately, but I think that all steps that we do take should be mindful of whether we're adding more things to that area or if we're decentralizing things from that area. And I think that's really important. I don't think we should continue to add more things to that area that will continue to make that a hub. I think we should be moving things out of that area in ways that actually decentralize it.
So do you think, right now, many of the people who are there are day people. They come for the drugs. They're not there for services. They're not there because they're homeless, because they come from other places. So I'm not really sure how finding housing is going to help. And if we found how, and I'll let you go rehire after this question, but it's an important question. Kim Janey found housing for everyone who needed it. She had 175 people that she said she was going to find housing for, and she found it. But Mass and Cass looks just the way it did before, in part because, hey, if you come here, you're not going to get arrested, and maybe if you stay long enough, you'll get a house. And you can keep using drugs as much as you want because no one's going to stop you. I don't see that I don't see how, is your goal to have smaller versions of the same thing in Mattapan and West Roxbury and wherever else you can commit? Or I'm not sure. I just don't understand this model.
So just to be clear, there's a model you can look at. It's called Heading Home. It's a fantastic model in the sense that it costs. So everybody here on this call and just in general is subsidizing sort of what is happening at Mass and Cass in a bunch of different ways. That's happening in a bunch of different ways. What Heading Home has shown is if you provide people housing, it's cheaper. It costs less for taxpayers and for people to put people in housing than to have to do everything through emergency services, have to do everything through sort of BPD overtime. And it's more effective in getting people onto treatment and things like that. So they have a bunch of data at Heading Home that I think is really worth looking at. Utah has done a similar model. There's other places that have made this work, where essentially when you give people and stabilize people with housing, it helps get us to the eventual place where they're actually receiving treatment. And even for the period in time where maybe they're still struggling with sobriety, it actually is still cheaper for regular people because they're not they're not actually using emergency services at the same level, which is being subsidized by folks. And so it's an effective model, both fiscally and for human cost. But in terms of what you're talking about, where you have people who are sort of coming in and then coming out, that's a different problem to me than the folks that are sleeping there in tents and or when there's no tents, just sleeping there overnight. I'm talking more about those folks overnight. And I think if you can take that population out of there, and then all you're dealing with is folks who are like coming there to sell drugs and or to buy them, that's a completely different sort of problem than when you have the homelessness aspect to it included. And I think it's more manageable if you handle these things sort of individually, rather than, there's no Operation Clean Sweep was a disaster. I mean, that happened once. Everybody dispersed into the neighborhoods. I think within 48 hours there was a call,
No,
public
I'm
call by the mayor.
talking about doing that though. I mean,
What I'm saying is without stabilizing people with housing, I don't know how we get to a place where people aren't standing on the corners there, is what I'm saying. So in terms of like the processes, I'm happy to hear from you all what you think, because obviously you've had the most experience with this, what you think is most effective. But I don't think that running people in and out of prison has worked. I don't think that just doing a quick sweep has worked. And so what I'm saying is there's a permanence to the housing that I think is really important, and at least deals with that initial aspect of people living there. And then we can focus on folks who are coming in and coming out, which is very different to me than the folks who permanently sort of live there.
I'll let Jahira go, but I just want to say Kim Janey did that. It was pretty clean at the end, 2 or 3 days after she started the sweep or whatever,
Yeah.
a week. You drove by in February, it was clean. It looks just the same now. That did not work. Full stop. We have just as many people as we did last year. Full stop. It was not effective. So, and Jahira just, I've monopolized most of this, so please.
Well, I appreciated it, Andrew, to be honest with you. Haida, I know you had your hand up. I don't want to really be the moderator here because it's
No,
yours.
So I think the biggest question I think a lot of people want to know is, right, like, how do we, although we understand that individuals that are on mass and cast are struggling with an array of issues, right? Mental health disorders, homelessness, addiction. They've been turned down and, have traumas of service deliveries. And so there's a lot that's happening down here. But how do we address, what I think is the biggest question is safety. There is a lot of unsafe situations that are happening on mass and cast that not only are impacting individuals that are in the throes of addiction and navigating homelessness and that are navigating mental health disorders because of the closures of all these facilities and all these things that are happening. How do we address that piece? How do we address the individuals who are stabbing people, who are assaulting individuals? How do we address that safety piece so that not only community is not safe, the people that are out there safe?
I missed out on that last part.
Domingos, thank you.
How do we keep everyone safe? Literally from
Yeah, and so one of the things I can tell you on that, just straight up, because I know it's a problem that folks have had, is there's going to be a zero tolerance policy on violence. There's going to be a zero tolerance policy on violence. So if you are committing violence, if you are fighting, if you are, most recently, I think we saw a stabbing of a business owner, right? If you are doing violent acts, you are going to be held accountable for violence acts. That's just going to happen. That's not on the do not charge list, if you will. That's going to be held accountable. Any violence upon any party's person, whether it's sexual in nature, whether it's violent in nature, whether it's whatever that is, you're going to be prosecuted. I think we have to separate that from folks who are in the throes of addiction and are frankly need services. And I think you can do that. I don't think that that's like impossible to do. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I think that's something that can be done. I think the issue that I don't think anybody on this call is, under the belief that this can be fixed overnight. I think everybody here has been advocating and working on this for so long that you understand that there's like multiple steps to all of these things. What I am trying to do and what I will always be open to and receptive to, and why I'm sitting here today with you all specifically, is so that we are always working with those most impacted, and here people are the most impacted, on solutions that get to what I consider long-term success. And for me, my goal is not small, but we've done this. We've done quick, you brought up the end of Kim Janey. That actually, I didn't even put that in the same context, but that is the same thing, right? That was sort of its own version of Operation Clean Sweep, where we ended up doing sort of an overnight sort of, everybody's got to go. And then here we are again. We know that's not going to work. And so for me, what I'm trying to do.
We don't know that isn't going to work. We didn't give it a chance. It's very different than what Michelle Wu did. But we never gave it a chance to work. She canceled it the second day in her office.
Well, the courts canceled it because they didn't actually.
No, they didn't cancel it. They lost. The
my understanding was they didn't have enough people to actually maintain their special court, and so they ended up actually closing it because they felt like it was a waste of the judge's time. But I can research that again just to make sure that I'm accurate on that.
Talk to Sheriff Tompkins. Talk to Sheriff Tompkins. But
happy to do it. Happy to do it. So, Jahida, to your point, I think we just have to make sure that anybody who is engaging in violent behaviors has to have a zero tolerance policy. I just agree with that. I think the reality is, though, that the best way to make sure that there aren't people there to sort of be attacked or to have that attraction is to remove sort of that element of folks who are dependent on living there and make sure that you are giving them housing and the resources they need. I think that's the first step. And I think if we can get that and we can decentralize sort of some of those services so that they're more available and accessible to them, we are going to have better long-term success. And I think the goal here should be long-term success. And so that's really what I'm trying to get to. From the standpoint of being the district attorney, really what that comes down to is how we're going to use the powers of prosecution. And what I can tell you is we will prosecute people who commit violent crime. We will prosecute people who are trafficking or sexually assaulting individuals on the mile. We will do those kinds of things. But I think the way to make it so that we are not creating sort of a hub for that kind of behavior is to make sure that we are actually centering people's housing and treatment. And that's separate and apart from, I think these are different populations. You're talking about people who live there, and then you're talking about people who come in and then go somewhere else. And those are two separate and different populations. And I think if you can alleviate one of those populations, then you're better able to narrow in and address the second population.
Go ahead, Marla.
Hi, I'm Marla Smith. I live near Clifford Park, and that also puts me very close to the South Bay Center, which is the nearest shopping area in my neighborhood. And my question has to do sort of with the no charge list that Rachel Rollins had and whether or not you'll be maintaining that. And I realize it doesn't literally mean no charge. It means on a case-by-case basis, but that list has had a very negative impact on South Bay Center and the people who don't have a whole lot of choice but to shop there, in terms of the people who are accessing, say, Stop and Shop and robbing them, and accessing Target and robbing them, to the point where if you want to buy shaving cream in Target now, you have to find somebody to unlock the cabinet. You want to buy a stick of deodorant, you have to find an employee to unlock the cabinet. Literally everything in Target that is like an item on the shelf other than clothes is under lock and key. So, this word that got out about Rachel Rollins' no charge list fed into this. People rob Home Depot, they walk in, they take whatever they want. And they're not eating, they're not breaking into Stop and Shop to steal some food because they're hungry. They're stealing a bolt cutter from Home Depot to go steal a scooter up the street. So that's not in and of itself a violent crime, but they swing that bolt cutter at you with a violent crime, and they steal somebody's, $2,000 scooter. That's not violent, but it's a serious crime. So what is your plan if elected for your office? Are you going to maintain her do not charge list, or are you going to look at that a little more closely, particularly in the impact it's had in this neighborhood? And what would you do differently from what she's done?
So on the do not charge list, I'm actually keeping the do not charge list. I just want to be blunt on that. But one of the things that is certainly, the do not charge list used correctly should be redirecting folks to, it's not a simple, get out of jail free card. That's not how it should work, at least. And so from the standpoint of how we look at that, a lot of things are going to go into sort of how we evaluate how this works. One of them is what you kind of described, which is, a theft of something that is at a felony level is a whole different kind of conversation, which is something over the amount of like $1,200 is a whole different conversation than, say, somebody who tried to take shaving cream. But I also think that often what we should be doing is individuals who are taking things in that way are usually in distress in some way, shape, or form. I say that as somebody who's represented individuals who were stealing things from a Target either for resale so that they can get money for a drug addiction, or so that they could actually just take care of their own necessities. That's very different to me than somebody who is harming an individual in terms of their actual self. So I guess the way I would look at that, to be perfectly frank, is if they're doing things that are causing harm to private residents and individuals in that way, I look at that very differently than if Target is having to put down on their losses that's insured by, covered by insurance, that they lost some toiletries. I think of this very differently than if they broke into Marla Smith's backyard, than if they broke into
That's
Target
happened.
Corporation. I'm sure it has. And so what I'm telling you is there's a differentiation for me between
I
what that
understand that,
is and who
But
victim.
further to that, when someone comes in to steal something from wherever, there's impact to the other people who are in the store, who get
Absolutely.
shoved out of the way, who get knocked over, who have their own
All of that
personal
would be,
items
so
taken.
all of that would be taken into account. I think personal theft from an individual is very different than sort of, I just do. I think if you get robbed, for instance, walking into a Target, that's a very different situation than somebody stealing something from a Target. Those are sort of shoplifting to like actual robbery of an individual. I think those are different things and should be looked at differently. When we're talking
I
about,
agree with you, but I also think there's a level here where this is what people in this neighborhood are seeing, and it's being normalized for them. So while a mother is in the store telling her kid why she can't have a candy bar, but somebody just walks in, tears open a box of Hostess cupcakes and starts eating them. I mean, I don't think that person should go to jail. Plainly, they're hungry, plainly, they're disturbed, but it's creating a circumstance in this neighborhood where it's very hard to explain to children right from wrong when all kinds of wrong is going on up the other end of the street, and we're powerless to do anything about it. And we've been asking for help for ages. And it just seems like everybody just keeps wanting to kick the can down the street. I mean, the police don't arrest people. There's people selling drugs in plain sight. I mean, if you have eyes, you can tell who lives there and who's a drug dealer. They're people who are not obviously in any kind of distress, who are robbing Home Depot. No, I don't care if Home Depot gets robbed. They have insurance for that. But there's people who are exploiting the situation, who are not, the substance users who are in a state of distress. They're people who are just exploiting the situation because they can.
yeah, and I think one of the things that we would be looking at specifically is we want to be really data driven. I think that matters. And so with Rachel, we know that about 1 in 4 people were charged. And I would like to look at sort of what were the decisions that went into saying, okay, look, for this individual, 1 in 4 people, we're going to charge you. And I think part of that is looking at specific scenarios in terms of how that individual, like the totality of the circumstances of that individual, did they push somebody? Did they assault somebody? Did something happen? But also I think there's something to be said about looking at that from a communal standpoint and say, okay, when we charge 25% of the time, it's in these specific areas, or it's in these specific areas, or it's this kind of specific individual. And I think when I get a chance to look at that data, because I don't have that data, I haven't, until I'm the district attorney, I won't have that data. I won't know what sort of analysis was going into the 25% that were being charged. But what I can tell you is the idea here is not at all to create some kind of revolving door where somebody can go in and push Marla out of the way and grab some shampoo and go out and then maybe get arrested and then come back and do the exact same thing. That's not the way that I envision that working successfully, but I have to actually look at what they're kind of looking at in terms of how many of these folks have come back repeat offenders? How many folks are, what is the cutoff line that was in existence already where they would say this person has to get charged, this 1 in 4 person has to get charged, but these other 3 don't. And until I see that, I don't feel comfortable detailing to you exactly how I'm going to move on that. It could be that we have a tighter list in that sense, but it could also be that 1 in 4 is appropriate. Until I actually see that, I don't want to make moves based on, and this isn't me saying that anything here is just people telling me sort of a story. I know this happens every day. I think it's more so looking at the data and seeing, are these new people coming in and doing this? Is this somebody who's got 10 offenses? What are we actually looking at, and how are we actually engaging with this? And that's something that I think I can do once I see the data, and I can give you a more, one of the things I will be doing as the district attorney is having regular community meetings. I think that's really important. I think it's important that folks understand the charging decisions we're making, why we're making them, how that's working and impacting them. I think that's incredibly important. That's why I'm here today talking with you. But as district attorney, I'd at least have some data and information that I could share in a much more structured way. And that's what I would do about things like this. I would be looking at, well, look, 1 in 4 times we do it, but it only happens when they do it in Roxbury. Or 1 in 4 times we do it, it only happens when they do it in South Boston. It would let me have a better sense of how we're actually handling these problems, both in the county as a whole, but also specifically in Mass and Cass and in this particular area where it seems to be sort of a hub. I think that's incredibly important to sort of know how we're treating that situation, as opposed to how we're treating that same sort of offense in another neighborhood.
Okay, just 2 more quick comments and then I'll let somebody else talk. I wanted to follow up on what Andy said. Absolutely, people's primary reason for coming here is to buy and use drugs. They may access services once they've been here a while. They may take advantage of things that are here once they've been here a while. But the primary reason that draws people here is to buy and use drugs. Unfortunately, if you go into Google Maps and punch in methadone mile, it comes up as a location.
That should be changed. I don't like that.
Well,
So
Google
Google
Maps
literally-
yourself. I mean, it's so. I mean, that's the level we're at. You can Google methadone mile if you don't happen to know where it is, and find it on Google Maps.
That's something I would see if there's something we can do with Google on that. I'm glad you brought that to my attention.
And
Hey, guys.
I've misplaced my other thoughts, so I'm sure it'll come back, but I'll let somebody else take over. Thanks very much for your answers.
Brenda had her hand up, Domingos.
Well, I just wanted to stay on exactly what's being said. The data is not going to be 100% concrete because they're not arresting anybody. You're not going to have the data you need to actually work off of because they're not arresting anybody. It's going to be hard to see what it's really going on Mass and Cash because they're not arresting anybody. 84% of the arrests that are occurring are violent crimes. It's not the breaking and entering into people's cars. It's not the assaults that are happening in the park where the individuals like myself are making reports and nothing's happening. I call the police every day, 3-4 times a day for public indecency, for drug usage and so forth in front of children. And the response is, it's not a priority 1 call, first available unit, 45 minutes goes. The person who's committing this lewd act in front of these children just walks away with no consequences, comes back an hour later, does it again, does it 3-4 times a week. So that data that you're looking for is not going to exist. And it's sad to say that.
One of the things I think we should do though for that data is, as long as people are calling 911, I think we can actually track that 911 data for those kinds of calls. And so that's something else we can do, which is just break down on that list how many 911 calls a day come in with things that are on that list. That's, I think, another way, which might get to the fact that, you know, what you're talking about, they're not taking as a priority, so there's no arrest data and there's no court data, but that 911 call still exists. And so we might be able to piece together how many times a day we're getting 911 calls on specific kinds of incidents, if you get what I'm saying, as long as people are calling it in.
I agree.
That's part of the problem too. Folks are tired of calling it in. Folks are tired of putting in 311 reports for incidents that are happening on Mass and Cash because they know there's nothing being done. There's nothing changing. No matter how much they do call, they're not getting the results that they're looking for. But I'll let Brenda jump in and ask her question because I have a lot to say, but I'll let her do her thing. So like that, we can make this a balanced conversation.
I really don't have a question. I just have something to add as a former police officer. It is, you know, we have to keep having these conversations for one, and there are arrests that should be mandatory. Perhaps there's something that needs to be in writing where police officers have to adhere to. When domestic violence became a mandatory arrest, there were certain things that it was like a checklist that we had to go down. Is the person harmed? Are they in fear? You know, there's something that should guide the police officers' actions, and they should be held accountable on how they respond to those calls. So that's my position. I mean, I think that we have to continue to have these conversations, but at the end of the day, we can hold law enforcement accountable in terms of their response and how many people you have monitoring that area. Go back to the stations and figure out how many people are assigned. When they want overtime for the baseball games and the football games, you know, people have to write, you know, there's accountability for that. So there are numbers, there are things that you can track. There are things that you can track. And so I think that this is a healthy conversation. I think it's a productive conversation because there are solutions. There are things that can be done as opposed to us saying, well, there's not enough data. There's ways to create some accountability is what I'm saying. I believe there's actually some ways. It's going to involve a partnership with BPD and, you know, the superintendents, the higher ups, but it has to start somewhere. I think it's doable though. I actually think it's doable because I think we've been complaining for a long time, the lack of a response with law enforcement, and some of them are getting paid to patrol that area. So they don't get to patrol that area and not be accountable for what they're doing while they're supposed to be doing their job.
Hey, Brenda,
Thank you, Brenda.
we've been down there. And the response has been, well, they're gonna get locked up and get released anyway. So why are we gonna arrest them? I mean, we've had Boston police officers straight up say stuff like that to us. They're gonna get let go anyway. So what are we gonna do?
So I guess for me, you know, Counselor, if you become DA, how much pressure are you willing to put on Boston police in terms of the accountability and what they do when they're in this area? And what would be considered a mandatory arrest versus not a mandatory arrest? Like how much are you willing, how much pressure are you willing to put on them?
I think acts of violence, right? I think there was a video not that long ago of an actual like brawl, and I didn't see law enforcement get involved in that at all. And I think those are the kinds of things where you're just, if you're allowing violence to happen in plain view, in plain sight, I don't think that's beneficial for anybody who exists in that space, period, right? So I think one of the things that we want to make sure we're pressuring folks to always make arrests on are any kind of acts of violence, because those things can those things can escalate, those things can move on, and they just should not be tolerated. I think that's one of the things that really I would ask them to focus on. I thought it was disturbing to see that video where, you know, I know law enforcement is there pretty much 24/7 at this point because we pay the overtime on that. And yet, if anybody get out of a cruiser or come over and break that up, and maybe the video closed before they did that, but I didn't see that, and I thought that was sort of an issue.
We have seen, Councilor Arroyo, we have seen, and Domingos, anybody on this call, Brenda, we've been down there while in our journey of doing the humanitarian work, passing out food, all that. We have seen women legit being picked up by men while they incoherent, literally can't even stand on their 2 feet, being picked up by men that are dragging her to somewhere that we don't know. And there's been plenty of times, Domingos can tell you, that we're like, hey, what are you doing? Where are you taking her? Oh, shut the F up. It's like, wait a minute, what are you doing? We've even seen a woman laid out on the sidewalk being fondled, okay? People going up her bra while she's laid out on a sidewalk. And we're like, hey, what are you, oh, she's my friend. Well, if she's your friend, why are you going up her t-shirt, up her shirt while she's incoherent? She doesn't know that you're touching her. You know what I mean? And mind you, a police cruiser will be a few steps away. Or not.
Yeah, and I think any kind of physical harm like that needs to have that can't be tolerated. I just don't think that should be tolerated. So that's where I would pressure them to really step up on arrests and what they're doing there, because I think those kinds of assaults are a problem.
Are there cameras in that area?
I believe I voted for the business district. I believe they're putting them in there. Yeah, or they already have it.
My thing is on public indecency. There's tons of that.
Open and gross food and things like that. Yes.
There's tons of that happening in front of children. Like, how are we going? What would you do if you do win the position to protect the children in the community who are witnessing a lot of these lewd acts with no consequences?
That's not on the list of 15. I just want to be clear. Public indecency is not on the list of 15. So that is not.
I will send you videos. I will send you.
Oh no, I'm not doubting. I'm not doubting you that it happens. What I'm saying is it's not on the do not charge list, and so that's not something that we would be tolerating. Public indecency, especially with children, is not something that we would ever tolerate.
So how will you be holding BPD accountable for the lack of concern?
I'm honestly, if they're not taking that seriously, that's incredibly concerning to me. Like I don't understand. Public indecency to children should be taken seriously.
That's right.
So that I just want to be clear. I'm concerned that you're telling me they're not concerned. Let me put it like that. So from that standpoint, yes, that would be something that I would be telling them to take seriously. Public indecency to children is something that we should be doing. And frankly, if we feel like it would be a problem in another community, but wouldn't be a problem in this community, then that's another issue. And so I think if BPD is sort of selectively enforcing, I think that's a problem. But without looking at the data, without looking at how they're actually handling that, I can't say that they're selectively enforcing on it. But what I do believe is what you're saying, Domingos, which is you've seen it happen because you're in the parks and they haven't done anything about that. I have a problem with that. So that's not on
They
my
say
different
they can't do anything about it. They say they're powerless to do anything about it.
That's
I've been in the
doesn't make
park with Domingos when people are literally having sex in the middle of the field. They're using the porta potty that's over there as a, a mini hotel room. They come out of there, they whip their clothes off. Men are, urinating in public. It's everything that goes on in this neighborhood wouldn't be tolerated anywhere else and isn't tolerated anywhere else. And that's the message we've been
So police
screaming and
are
yelling
refusing-
about for the last
Police
8
are
years.
refusing to arrest on that?
They don't give a reason. They just, literally in the case with Domingos, when the two people were fornicating in the middle of the park, the two officers stood there, waited for them to finish, and everybody moved along like it was a perfectly reasonable thing to have happen in the middle of a park.
Yeah,
That's
that
what
wouldn't, that
Carlos,
wouldn't
so
be.
now you know why we upset, right? It's not you, it's not anybody in
No, that
particular.
nobody should be dealing with
It's
that.
about what is not
I don't
happening.
even know how to make sense of what you just told me. So I'm trying to figure that
Right.
out. So
And I
That-
want to share this from Mary Ellen Tripp. And a huge shout out to Damian Hughes' family, who's been very active in the conversation. So I know that she wanted me to kind of put this out there. So Damian Hughes was brutally stabbed on Madison Cass. 2 years ago, guys? 2 years ago? By someone who did have a stay away order and was banned from that location, who brutally stabbed Damian Hughes. And the aunt is in the thread on Facebook, and she says, law enforcement didn't get involved when my nephew got stabbed and killed. 2 years ago, and he's still in jail. He needs to go to jail for life. They're waiting for, this is all bull. Nothing is being done. How many people need to get killed before something is done? Which is another part of this conversation, Mr. Arroyo, right? There's a lot of people who have been banned from that location, but because there's so many people in that area, it's hard to know who's supposed to be down there, who's not even supposed to be down there, because this person who stabbed Damian Hughes, if you looked at this individual's rap sheet, right, the individual definitely had a lot of stuff going on. Most of his criminal activity was related to aggressive behavior, and things like that. He was also banned from the shelter because I believe this individual also assaulted staff in that area, but he stayed in that location and brutally stabbed Damian Hughes, who was standing up, if I'm not mistaken, Mary Ellen, and since you're in the watching, that he was protecting a staff member, if I'm not mistaken, Domingos or Marla, because this person was getting aggressive with a staff member, one of the nurses, and Damian stood up for the nurse, and he got stabbed literally at the doorsteps of the shelter.
First and foremost, I just want to say sorry for your loss. That's awful. And this is why I think, often violence can escalate. And that's why I think when you create sort of a zero tolerance policy on violence in this area, at least you're sort of catching it before it escalates to that degree. That's awful. And I'm sorry that you had to experience that. I think that's awful. There's nothing else anybody can really say about a homicide, except I never wish that on anybody. And I'm incredibly sorry for your loss. And I hope that we do make sure that our justice system delivers justice for you in a way that helps you with your healing. I noticed the time is 8:55 and I have until 9. So I want to make sure that I give folks the last 5 minutes if there's something that you would like to say. I just want to also just tell you all, I appreciate your advocacy. I know that you've been on this for a very long time. I understand that you've dealt through several iterations of plans and different things that have happened. And I agree with you that a decade later, I don't think we've seen much progress. And so I want to be part of that solution for you. I understand I'm just one part of sort of the machine that is as part of this system here. But I will be an advocate for making sure that we are delivering resources, because part of the issue here is making sure that the state pays their fair share, because this isn't just a Boston issue, and this isn't certainly just a South End, Roxbury issue. And so making sure that we get resources and money into this area to deal with these issues is important to me as well, including resources and money that the district attorney's office may have the ability to allocate.
I have one last question, and you can keep it quick if you want to, but how would you be working with other district attorneys throughout the region to kind of help address this, right? Because a lot of the individuals we know are not from Boston. And how do we work with other DAs to say, how do we step up and how do we level up this decentralization of services and a more a partnership to ensure that every county is working towards improving services and finding the system within the scope of their power to ensure that Boston does not continue to become the dumping grounds of what everyone else does not want to see in their community.
I think one of the issues that we have that I remember from my time as a public defender when it comes to other district attorneys that I would be working on is two things. The first one is where the offense happens isn't always where they live. And so when you end up creating sort of a treatment plan or a probation plan or whatever you're creating to make sure that that person is in a better position to succeed, you end up then transferring that to another county. So for instance, if the offense happened in Suffolk County, but they live in Salem, you would transfer their probation and who's supervising them over to Essex County. And often that disconnect means that the plan that you created in Suffolk County, that, you know, I created this with Suffolk County in mind, but now they're going to be in Essex County, that plan doesn't exist, and then there's no follow through, and you actually see them just sort of keep going through cycles of harm. So one of the things I would try to do is make sure that we are coordinating with other counties and making sure that if we are creating plans to rehabilitate, that plan is mutual, that if they don't live in our county, we are working with the district attorneys in those counties to ensure that we're not signing people up for a bunch of conditions or things that we want them to do that they're not going to hold them to, or that they don't have the ability to hold them to. And so those are the kinds of things I want to make sure we're working on. The second one is something that happens a lot, which is somebody will get arrested in Suffolk County and has a warrant for something minor out of like another county in another part of Massachusetts. And then instead of us being able to sort of create a structured plan here to answer on that warrant, they have to go somewhere else across the state. And then that person is sort of not in your system anymore. They're in somebody else's system while they answer on that pre-existing sort of prior existing warrant. And I think in instances like that, where we have access to a treatment facility or we have access to a rehabilitation center that we can get them in that day, I would be working with other district attorneys to say, is there a way for you to waive this or to drop this or to work with us so that we can give this person the resources they need right now that we've already got signed up, rather than putting them on a sheriff truck and send them off to you, and then that bed is gone. And so we used to see that all the time, where somebody would have a shoplifting and we would spend the whole day, because they were in our court, finding them a bed, and then we would say, oh wait, we have to send them out to, you know, Salem to answer on a warrant, and then they would go to Salem and the bed's gone, and then they're out on no bail, and then they're gone again. And so making sure that we're creating partnerships with other counties where we have resources for somebody, where we've actually secured that, and they have some low-level warrant, that we create some arrangement where we are allowing them to go to the rehabilitation or to the programming that we got them so that they can actually succeed, rather than creating this cycle of saying, oh, well, you got to go answer on that warrant over there, and then in the next week, they're back in Suffolk County and nothing has changed. I think those are the things that we can do with other sort of district attorneys to make this system work a little bit better. One hand should talk to the other hand, basically, and make sure that we're coordinating on that.
I would agree with that. Sheriff Tompkins complained about that. Was one of the challenges that he had in the first few weeks of his system. So I thank you for that, because I believe that is a real issue. It was very disappointing to hear that.
That was part of his plan. That I remember with his plan, that was a big part of the problem, is that they would get people for the programming, but then all of a sudden they had to go out to like Lowell or Lynn because they had a shoplifting warrant. And so then they were gone, then they were out of his control and out of the ability to actually get into these resources. And I think that's a problem that we could probably solve.
I do remember one of the challenges, and I think I think we're both right about what happened with the court, the court that he had established. He didn't have all the beds. He needed like 2 or 3 more weeks to get the beds ready. And so they didn't arrest people for the purpose of trying to get them into those beds because they weren't ready yet. And that was part of the reason why the judge, so yes, you are technically correct, but it's not, it's accurate, but it's not really representative of what happened. So I hope you would try to give that another chance because I think it was the first thing that was truly different, and I don't know if it would have worked. We don't know. It was canceled after 3 weeks.
And so I think, you know, it's 9:01 p.m. I have to go, but the one thing I will tell you about these plans is we can't keep creating new plans. Like if you ran an organization this way, or you ran a sports franchise this way, where every 2 years you're ripping out all of the plan, now you got a new plan, or you're getting rid of all, you know, this was the coach, but now we got a new coach. This was the general manager, but now you got a new general manager. That's a dysfunctional franchise in sports. That's a dysfunctional company. And if we're continuing to just come up with new plans for Mass and Cass every 2 years, then you're not getting to the implementation part.
We've had the same plan, except for those 3 weeks. We've had basically the same plan for 10 years.
But we haven't gotten the implementation, which has been a real problem, I think. And so I've heard a lot of like discussion about what the plan could be or should be, but I haven't seen the implementation. And I think that's the part I would like to get us to get to. I really want to appreciate all of y'all. This is not going to be the only meeting we have. I just want to be clear. If I am the district attorney, I will have meetings regularly with folks. That includes community organizations like y'all that are dealing with what's going on over at Mass and Cass. And so I'm not going to be a stranger to you all. You will see me. We will have conversations. Things that are working, you will let me know. Things that aren't working, you will let me know. And I think that's a healthy way to do this. So I just want to say thank you to all of you.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. We'll look forward to seeing you again.
All right, guys. He's gone.
Well, stay on. Yeah, we can, you know, again, debrief like we always do.
Yes.
So, you know, who is it? The Troublemakers? I'm sorry, guys.
Angelic
I've had a long
Troublemakers.
day. I've been at the park since like 12 o'clock this morning. Just a whole bunch of things, but you know, accountability, you know, we have to hold ourselves accountable before we can hold them accountable. We can't continue to listen to the conversation and wait for them to roll out their plans. We have to actually, again, make those plans work for us, not the other way around. It's great to have them come on and speak on some things, but you and I know there's little to no data when it comes to the issues we see on Mass and Catch because there's no arrests. There's no calls going in. We're not getting 15, 20 calls about the guy running around Clifford Park buck naked, the guy in the middle of Mass Ave butt naked, because people are expecting, you know, the police officer who's standing there to be the guy making the call. I waited all day for them to come and pick up those needles that we seen this afternoon. Yes, they came and picked up the needles and left the needle. Then they came back with an attitude to pick up needles. And all the paraphernalia is still there. No one picked it up. The human feces is still there. No one picked it up. So again, are we gonna walk away and take his word for it, you know, if he gets in or not? Or are we gonna continue to do what we've been doing to keep the pressure on the electeds? You know, today it was funny to see the team from the police department walking the park. It was funny to see staff members come out and walk the park. But golly, I got to get on Twitter. You got to get on Twitter 3 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon to get something done at 4. So the accountability piece is up to us. And if we continue doing what we're doing, we'll be able to get some of the results we're looking for. But I'm not holding my breath. But I am going to continue to, you know, be that nuisance as long as this issue exists.
But Don't forget, they are paying for overtime. They're paying these cops for overtime.
Oh,
So
yeah, $4 million or
accountability-
more.
yeah, that's right. That accountability piece is very important. You don't need data for that. Either they're doing their job or they're not. I think you guys need to work on having more cameras down there.
Yeah, that was part of the conversation with the New Market Square bid that they put in, is to increase
They're
increase some of the
installing cameras
cameras.
in the coming weeks to focus on like the doorways and entryways of the various businesses down there to help keep people from loitering in them and doing whatever else they're doing in them.
Mhm.
Well, Target has 100 cameras and they still stealing. So cameras only
Right.
do so much.
Well, a
You know,
camera
we
can't
need-
chase anybody, it can just record.
Right. We need people to be actually active and proactive in what they're doing. We need officers to actually come out their cruisers and engage with the community. We need them to actually perform these sweeps daily, not when someone calls or when someone making, Twitter posts. We need these things done every single day. I know the DA's office is gonna, same thing as before. The police are not doing their job, so I can't do my job. The passing
Right.
of the buck is always going to be the first response. This is again, I like Ricardo. I'm not gonna lie, I like Ricardo, and the allegations that are out. Let those things play out. But this was a gentleman who responded to us as it's not my district originally when we
Right.
reached out 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And 2 years later, yeah, people change. Okay, I'll give him that. And he's willing to meet with us, But again, what is truly going to happen once you get in office? We've heard 1,000,001 campaign promises. We continue to hold Michelle Wu accountable. We were holding her accountable as a city councilor at large. Now
Mhm.
she's the mayor. We still holding her accountable, but we don't see the results that we're looking for. And all we're asking for is a safe community, a healthy community for our families to grow in. We're not asking for anything else that anyone else is not getting. We shouldn't have to scream louder and jump up higher to get what everyone else is getting without having to do anything.
Mhm. I also think that we have to closely examine the data that does get out there. Because lately, I don't know who put it on, it was Michelle Wu or Tanya Del Rio. Somebody was talking about how many people have been housed, and I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but it's roughly like 340 people or something across all the various housing platforms have been housed. And of those, some number like 62 have found permanent housing. And of the people who were housed, I don't know the exact number again, something like 170 are still in housing. Which all sounds fine. But when you add 172 that are still in housing and the 62 that have found permanent housing, that doesn't equal 340 or whatever the number was. There's like 100 people just unaccounted for. Where'd they go? They go back to the street? Did they die? Did they voluntarily leave the program? We need to drill down on the numbers that they are putting out there, which are few and far between, and find out the answers to those questions. Where'd those 100 people go? I don't know about you, but I'd like to know.
Well, you're absolutely right on that. People need to make sure that those numbers are actually accurate and they're
Well,
not
if only
doctored,
because when
a
they
lot of
say
the stuff-
340 people got housing, yeah, but there's not 340 people in housing. They're right back here.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh man, excuse me. I'm exhausted. Long day,
Yeah.
and it's only getting longer by the minute. And I'm glad that we've had this conversation, and looks like DA Kevin. Hey, what is it? Hayden? What is his damn last name?
Hayden,
Yeah.
Hayden.
Yeah, he's reached out, and he wants to have one of his conversations with us, and we're gonna oblige because we've reached out to him, and it's crickets. Folks seen our posts on Twitter, and now all of a sudden it's like, hey, I didn't know there was a forum. No, it's not a forum. It's an actual hour of real conversation.
Yeah.
It's
Unprepared
not-
questions.
the issue, right, is that decentralization is a big topic, but I'm curious to know that even if we decentralize, we know that every community has, a housing development in each. West Roxbury, Hyde Park, right? There's one. And one of my biggest things that I want to know in data and research is that if we're going to start talking about decentralizing and opening, housing availability to house individuals that are in this area, where are we talking about when we're even referencing JP? Are we going to talk about putting in near the housing projects, adding more to what's already going on in that area, right?
Mhm.
I want to finally hear someone talk about why is it that anything that's related to social ills are always continue to be pushed in areas and locations of communities and with individuals that are already dealing with the social ills of living
They're
in
already stressed communities.
poverty, they're living in stress, they may be living in low income, one parent household, or a parent who's navigating addiction, or someone who's in the system. Why do we continue to add all those elements into spaces that are already dealing with that? And that's where I just want to have people really talk about what is your plan to basically unstrip these communities from all the social ills that continue to be dumped there on purpose.
Well, you got to change the legislation. If you don't change the laws and you don't change the language there, it ain't gonna change because again, most impacted communities. As long as it says in the legislation that these programs are to be put in the most impacted communities, that's what's going to continue to happen. We have 51 dispensaries coming to Boston. The majority of them are in the Black and brown community. On top of the liquor stores, on top of Mass and Cash. That's the norm. Dudley Street got like 4 of them coming. Between Columbia Road and Dudley Station, there's like 4 dispensaries coming to that one strip. We're talking about, a half a mile strip. And that's what goes on when we put people in positions where they're not looking to change that language. They're not looking to change it because the people who are holding the power want to continue to saturate our community because their community, you're not going to find a liquor store in Brookline open after 9. You're just not. And you're not going to find a liquor store in the first place because they're called wine and spirit. They're not liquor stores. We got liquor stores and markets. I walk into the liquor store and these dudes are selling pastelitos because that's what we normalize. Today I did an interview with one of the stations and there was a family there before the reporter showed up. And I asked the family, would you like to, speak on what you see? And the young mother had 4 children and what was going on around them, because it's normalized, they never batted an eye. There was a group smoking meth. There was a group shooting up, and the children never batted an eye because it's been normalized. If you don't see it, then it's a problem. How come we don't see, I'm going to say this, and if it offends anybody, okay. I don't see crackheads no more. Where are the boosters at? Right now, we should be school shopping using boosters. I'm like, what? Yeah, I haven't seen a crackhead in the neighborhood in a minute. And I said, wow, that's actually true. There was a part in my life that we would sit and wait for individuals who are suffering from substance use who would bring us clothes that they would steal out of Jordan Marsh and Filene's and Macy's. And they would bring it to us and we would buy it because it was a lower price. And that was the norm. Now that we don't see it, everyone's like, yo, what's going on? What happened to the? And we can't continue to let that be the norm. It's not fair to the next generation of kids that that is becoming accustomed to see the group of alcoholics in front of the liquor store all day, every day on Blue Hill Ave. They just did the main street, and it was okay to have these individuals out there sipping and chilling like it's nothing. But I'm not seeing that on the lower ends of Dorchester Ave, the lower ends of Center Street and JP, and into West Roxbury. Like, that's not a
Mhm.
norm. Kids are not seeing that at JP Licks.
Well, that's what I was saying to Counselor Arroyo. What are kids seeing when someone comes ramming into Target and walks out with stuff, or comes busting into Stop and Shop and starts shoveling devil dogs in their face? You know, when their own mother says, no, you can't have a candy bar, or you can't have ice cream. And yet this person just walks in and starts eating it. And that becomes normalized, and people just see that as, oh, well, that's just a thing. But on the flip side, you drive down Southampton Street, that's just a thing. It's perfectly normal that we just have people living on the side of the street in a tent or under an umbrella. It's perfectly normal that a man is shooting drugs into his penis. We can't have that being normal. And we can't keep having first conversations 150 times, first meetings.
Right. and that's
Oh, but
what
this
it-
is a new plan we're gonna talk about. This is a new team, a new task force.
But I agree with Arroyo though. He's right. We've met with so many people that come up with these plans, but it feels like nobody is implementing the plans in
Mhm.
acts. Because the reality
Oh,
is,
I told you that is the plan. It's to talk
Right.
about the plan, to plan the
It's-
plan, and never put the plan out to be the plan.
Mhm.
right. And then it's like, we know that there isn't enough housing. And the reality is that more people are gonna come to this location when they know that as soon as they pitch a tent, they're gonna get housing, right? It's just, how do we break and stop what has been created, and like you said, Marla, normalized in this location? When we have, there's I believe her name is Christina, that's commenting on the Facebook post, and let's see, yeah, Christina, she says, I've been on over 100 housing lists. I have been on one housing list for 9 months and I've been clean, right? So the fact that, we continue to talk about, oh, we're gonna put people in supportive housing and shelters. Dude, there's no housing. I've been wanting to move back to the city to be closer to my mom for help with my kids. There's no housing in the apartments in Boston. Who is
Bananas.
paying $4,000 or $5,000 for a 3-bedroom apartment in Boston? Like, come on, what are we talking about here? And it's like, nobody wants to admit that. You know what I mean? You have places like, even where my mom lives, where, they're hiking up the rent, and they're only hiking up the rent for people who are on housing, right? Because they can get the federal dollars from subsidized and Section 8 tenants, and hike up the rent for those low income people, because they can get the extra money from the government, right? And then what happens? Now a family becomes ineligible, right? Because their what their rent amount now is like, oh, housing's not paying that amount. So now you have a family who has to relocate, because you got people like Wing Management and all these people who just want, you know what I mean? It's a mess. It's a mess.
And what that also does is drive up the median rent for an area. So that somebody comes in and says, oh, well, the median rent here is, $3,800 a month. That's what I'm going to ask for rent. And a lot of times, unfortunately, they get it, because you get 2 or 3 people living together and splitting the rent, because they can't, people are continuing to live like dormitory style because they can't afford an apartment. That's what's being normalized for people my kids' ages. That it's perfectly normal to live with, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people, not related, none of them married, none of them dating. You just live like it's a big giant frat house because you can't afford to live any other way.
People's gonna have kids.
People are putting off having kids because they can't afford to. They're putting off buying a home because they can't afford to. They can't even afford to move out of their parents' house. It's crazy.
Well, listen, Yadi, you need to get some rest.
Yep.
Okay, you need to take care of yourself. I'm gonna get myself off this foot. It's
Good.
I'm not gonna say it's 100%, but it's better than it was yesterday, and it's getting better. But I need to get off of it, give it some break. I'm just getting home after a long day, and I appreciate and love you, ladies. Just the fact that we continue to be, the voice. Folks might not like it, but we are strategizing going back to things that we know work. We brought a lot of attention to this situation because of what we were doing and how we were doing it. And the mayor might not like it, but she might have to plan for it.
Well, if she got elected to be liked, she got elected for the wrong reason.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you for inviting me, Domingos, and it was good to hear everyone's voice. And Marla, you hang in there. You are just, you're getting more and more vocal. You're like,
Oh, you have no idea.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
You should hear what I don't say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to hear from you, sweetie.
It's wonderful to see you, Brenda.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're all fighting. We're all fighting for a better community, just a better quality of living.
You go, Brenda.
Absolutely.
Article. I was like, yeah, we get it.
I know.
Well,
I'm still fighting, so you know.
And that's what people need to know. You know, we have good officers like you who are out there giving your time to the community, make it better. And one incident changed your life in a dramatic way, and they, you know, they ignore it. They ignore the fact that you are a dedicated officer who continues to advocate for your community. You didn't just disappear after your incident. You continue to fight for the last 10 years. And folks don't understand how much energy that takes. That's why I appreciate being in your presence, because it's a lot to continue every single day to wake up and go to sleep with this on your mind. And we have people who make all these promises about, you know, working on things that were an issue. No, they're not they're still an issue.
They're still an issue. Yeah.
There's still corruption in BPD.
Absolutely.
There's still things that need to be addressed. And when we have someone like you who need the support of the community, and they're too busy looking the other way because, you know, they got a job in the mayor's cabinet, or they got a position within city government, and instead of them being truthful you don't pull it off all the time. Instead of being truthful to the situation, they're just being, you know, puppets, and we can't afford that. We need people like you, Brenda. This is why I had to send you the link, because you need to hear some of the bullshit that come out of these asses' mouths.
Are you thinking about having a meeting with the commissioner, Michael Cox, about police accountability? Part of your problem is that they are getting overtime and they're not, you know, they're not down there patrolling.
That's in the works. That's why we have you here to help us generate the questions that we need to ask. That's why this is one of the most deadliest group in the city, because it's not a group of progressives. It's a group of misfits who are willing to cause the trouble. And I don't mean misfits in a bad way. Individuals who really want to see changes that come with a different walk of life. It's not a group of people who get along and nothing gets done. We are a group who have our highs, we have our lows, we have our likes and dislikes, and we're able to work together on the common good. And this is why we need more individuals to join and help us advocate for a better city. And you're absolutely right. What is Commissioner Cox going to do about accountability? Because he sued and won a lawsuit. And that lawsuit had to do about accountability of him being assaulted by his coworkers.
That's right.
And what's so different about his story and yours? You was assaulted by your captain. What makes him better? Because he's a male in a male-dominant department?
That's right.
So
yeah. I don't know. This city is
good.
Yeah, I gotta take an asthma treatment, y'all. All right,
All y'all get off of here, get better, go to bed.
Oh, everybody take care of themselves.
Bye, guys.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye. Good night.